Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
This week, London's schools get the best results in the country. Is that now under threat? A little later on today, we'll be looking at the shake-up of the way schools are funded, which is set to see 70% of them in the capital losing money. What will be the impact of that? With me this week, Labour MP for Hammersmith, Andy Slaughter, and the Conservative MP for Twickenham, Tanya Mathias. Welcome to you both. Let's kick off, though, by asking about the budget on Wednesday. One thing, what would you desperately like to see, Andy Slaughter?
I'd like to see the government come up with some solution to the crisis in our national health and social care system. That is what my constituents are saying to me is really worrying them. It's a chronic problem. We've got cuts going through, we've got hospital closures, beds being taken out of service, we've got waiting lists, we've got people dying, and we need an investment in the NHS. We need an assessment, first of all, about what the NHS's needs are.
Tanya, ditto?
Interesting. My priorities, as Andy will know, would be health and social care. I've got some cross-party support, some from your party as well, about ring-fencing that budget. I don't know that it will come next week, but that's where I want things to move towards. I also want protection, as everybody does, for education, our business rates, transitional relief, and Crossrail 2 for London.
Schools will come on to in a second, but that's kind of interesting on the social care thing. There is momentum growing here, and it's cross-party and so on, isn't it? And that means there is pressure on the Chancellor, isn't it?
Well, what I want is not just sticking plaster kind of budget. I want longer-term strategy, and I think there is a feeling in the Commons, what I call not making it a political football, having a strategy that will go on for decades. There are some good practices, as we know, health and social care, but everybody is stretched, absolutely. And that's what I want. I want the budget to show.
Let's go on to another one of your asks. Let's look at the issue of schools funding. There's a shake-up of the way schools are being funded underway, and some say it could mean 70% of schools in London lose money. The capital's been the best funded and got the best results in recent years. But what will happen now? Andrew Cryan reports.
The first school to be shut down because it's judged to be failing will close at the end of the year.
20 years ago, London schools were some of Britain's worst, with the vast majority of kids leaving without 5 good GCSEs.
We came to the conclusion that the boys attending Hackney Downs School were not getting the quality of education that they deserved, and they could do better to go elsewhere.
But big investment and radical reform of the way schools will run has helped transform education in the capital into something unrecognisable. Today, London schools are completely transformed. They are simply the best in the country, with 80% of schools being rated either good or outstanding by Ofsted. But could that all be about to change? 70% of London schools are set to lose money, thanks to a shake-up of the way education is funded. That's more than any other region in the UK. According to London councils, schools in the capital will have to make £360 million worth of savings in the first year the formula comes in. The Elizabeth Garrett Anderson School in Islington is one of the country's top 5% for attainment. But for how long? Each pupil here is set to lose around £650 in funding. The head teacher, Joe Dibb, said there's no way you can lose that amount of cash without education suffering.
What we would have to look at is, for example, do we increase class size? Do we make sure that every teacher is teaching a class is teaching the maximum number of students? And that will mean, obviously, that they've got less individual attention, they've got fewer resources to actually use. We'd need to think about every subject we offer and whether, in fact, we could afford to run a music class if there are only 15 students in it. All sorts of things that are outside the learning day by day in a classroom would have to go, and that would be reducing schools to such a bare, poor offer.
At the moment, kids here get around £7,000 a year each in funding. Like many London schools, that's well above the national average, which is why the government are changing it.
What we need to do is make sure that all schools have a fair funding. You've pointed out just what this school in Islington is getting. I don't know the school myself, but what I do know is that it's important to have a fairer funding system than we've got already.
We haven't really actually had a funding formula for about 15 years. The amount that different local authorities and schools get is largely based on how they looked in the early 2000s and is at the moment based on relatively out-of-date information.
By some measures, the schools with the highest funding in the country are in East London's Tower Hamlets. But according to the local mayor, John Biggs, there's a very good reason it should stay like that.
We have the highest level of child poverty of any local authority in the country. And we have very high costs as well. So to build a home in Tower Hamlets costs more or less anywhere else in the country. To retain staff requires us to pay extra premiums on the wages. And we have higher instances of special educational needs, for example, and kids in poverty who might have challenging lifestyles and need extra support.
But more than just the money, what will worry many parents is the threat of standards in schools slipping back to where they were 20 years ago.
Well, we asked for a minister to be in that film, or in fact join us in the studio, but no one was available. But as we know, we have Andy and Tanya here. Tanya, how's this funding formula going to affect the schools, 30-odd schools in your borough?
The funding formula, as you know, we've been given illustrative numbers. The point is the pie, as it were, which the formula is dividing up, that core budget, while it's protected, is not going to be enough. So while actually some boroughs, some London boroughs, may have a small increase, I believe, Andy, in your area, a slight decrease, I know it's the rural MPs who are saying the formula is fairer for them. But for me, it's the core budget that needs to increase, and that's the challenge.
The core budget across London, are you saying? Because I think
no, UK. Remember this.
Well, we know that's
formula.
going up by 1%, don't we? That's what your government is saying a lot. Yes, but in London, in your borough, for instance, I think is it like a 1%? You are getting a 1%.
Just over 1%.
So is that enough for you?
It's not, because the increase in liabilities, staff pensions, the national insurance contributions, those have all increased, and that's what I'm hearing from my schools. So we're still stretched. So regardless, one thing is the formula, which people, as I say, can still contribute to and consult on. We've got a few more weeks for that. But it's the core budget. Even though it's protected, all schools are still challenged. And that's the London challenge.
Andy, what's happening in Hammersmith?
The situation is incredibly serious. So yes, there is this change to a formula, which is essentially taking money from poorer areas, like Inner London. Inner London, with 50% free school meals, is losing the maximum it can, and the money is essentially going to wealthier areas. But a bigger problem, as Tanya has said, is that this inflation rises are not happening across this Parliament. The net effect over the 5 years of this Parliament, for Inner London and for Hammersmith, is a 13% cut. Now, schools' budgets have been going up for 40 years. Now, under a Labour government, they were going up by 5% in real terms a year. They haven't always been at that level. But to now have actual real terms cuts and to have the most deprived areas cut the most, and it's worse than that even, because come 2020, because they're effectively, they've got a floor. They're saying that you can only lose so much money. But after that, and some of my schools will still be 30% over budget, according to the government, but they'll get no increases going forward forever. But
what teachers appear to be saying is, like, you know, there will be maybe some impact on the curriculum. There will be larger class sizes, but you know the figures involved. We're talking 2% or 1%. No, they are figures they will be able to manage. We're not looking about vast numbers of staff being laid off.
Nobody is saying that. And yes, the immediate issue that we're debating and consulting on, I urge viewers to go to the Department of Education website and give their response by March 22nd. That's about this very unfair redistribution of money from poor areas to rich areas.
Is it unfair? Is it unfair? It's surely, we hear the IFS saying that it's 15 years old, that formula. We've got to find a new way. And what the existing situation perhaps underestimate is the kind of level of poverty and deprivation and stuff that exists in more rural areas as well. And actually, London has had such a focus on issues of deprivation, so much money and so much expertise. Perhaps it's had disproportionately. It's had too much.
I've got schools in my constituency where more than 2/3 of the kids are on free school meals. There's nowhere like that in the areas where the money is being sent to. This is a very cynical political trick to take money from Labour and give it to Tory constituencies. But on top of that, all schools are suffering. All schools are suffering because they're not getting the inflation.
You went into sort of cynical political trick. You were nodding there a little bit. Were you nodding? Do you agree with that point about that? Because there is a correlation. Obviously, outer London is gaining, predominantly Conservative.
Yeah, the formula, I would counter that. It's not it will be taking from one school, giving to another, but the point about the formula, and remember we've had a previous consultation phase, which the then Secretary of State for Education did add the mobility factors which London needed, and that's been included in this next phase. So actually the details of the formula are trying to address exactly what you're saying, are trying to address those higher needs. So I would counter that, and you did in your clip show MPs from other areas that have suffered in the past. I mean, I know, looking in the debates, my borough was cited as being unfairly advantaged in the old system because they were using such out-of-date data. And the schools that have written to me, they don't question the need for a fairer formula. I still think we do agree, though, on the pot.
But when you're looking at the formula, you look at London, would it seem right that the people in an area which is going to be, you know, widely accepted as being better off and sort of have fewer socio-economic problems, like Richmond, like Twickenham, that area is getting increases in funding while you're taking funding away from inner London boroughs where the results have been good but where the need exists?
But I think every person who contributes to that consultation is going to agree with Andy and myself, and the basis of this, it's per pupil, but it does give weight to places of extra need. And also the special, remember the special educational needs are protected in this formula as well.
That's what
rebalancing long overdue.
That's what I explained, what I said earlier. It's not just that this initial redistribution is disadvantaging the poorest areas. What we're being told then is you will still be getting too much money and you will not, for the foreseeable future, get any inflation increases going beyond 2020 at all. And that is a counsel of despair for parents and for teachers and for children.
OK, let's move on. More analyses emerged this week, pointing out how Brexit could shape the capital in future. The focus? Well, how to maintain a skilled workforce in the face of future immigration controls and what impact that could have on building vital housing and infrastructure. Tanja Rashid has more.
London is growing and it needs to build more homes and more infrastructure. To do that, the city needs skilled construction workers. But of the 350,000 workers in the sector, 95,000, or 27%, are from the EU. Post-Brexit, their right to work in the UK is now up for negotiation. The Deputy Mayor for Housing is worried about meeting his targets.
We have very challenging targets to meet, and we know it's going to be a marathon, not a sprint. We know it's going to be hard to get there, and I think this really underscores the fact that a hard Brexit would make that job a lot harder.
The construction sector is also worried.
We want to deliver more homes, we want to supply more homes, but frankly, without the construction workers and with imports becoming more expensive, you're heading into a perfect storm.
Those skills from the EU might be replaced by training Londoners. But that's not quite going to plan, according to a new report from the business advocacy group London First.
In construction, we can see over the last years we have available, from 2012 to 2014, the number of apprenticeships completed in London actually falling from 730 to 500. This is a sector that's crying out for skilled labour.
So what did the Minister for Housing have to say when MPs quizzed him this week?
If there is a mass exodus, if you like, what will be the effects?
Well, I don't really want to speculate on that because I don't think that's what's going to happen. The government is very, very clear that our objective, as soon as we get the negotiations underway, is to secure the status both of British citizens in the EU and EU citizens here.
He thinks an exodus is unlikely, but it's worth pointing out that the Prime Minister has so far refused to give assurances about EU workers staying in the country.
Well, Peter Whittles joined the debate, Deputy Leader of UKIP, as well as one of the two London Assembly members. Welcome to you. How do you anticipate, how do you think we're going to meet, I mean, construction sector is the one we focused on there, going to meet the needs of the economy if we or without EU workers?
Well, first of all, I mean, it's always been the position of my party that EU citizens who are here and working here and settled here should absolutely stay. I think that this is very bad of the government and Theresa May to basically put people in that position where they're like political pawns. So we absolutely think people should be allowed to stay.
But otherwise, she loses her negotiating position, doesn't she? She has to be careful with the, you know, the rights of our citizens abroad.
I don't think you should use people in that way. I mean, I think that we've never deviated from that. That basically, when Brexit comes, that people should basically be allowed to stay. But I think that the main problem really is, particularly in the construction industries we were talking about there, is that there is a massive skills gap. And, you know, the sort of things that have been coming out of City Hall this week somehow or other wants to kick this tin along the road. You know, it basically says, well, you know, yes, we do have a skills gap and we must look at that. But for the time being, we need these workers. Well, I would say, you know, basically, London's population has grown by 25% in 2 decades. You know, if you bring more people in to build more houses, where are these people going to live? Where are they going to live? Probably they'll end up living in appalling conditions, as we've often seen.
So what happens then? What are you saying? What are you arguing should happen? You'd say the construction workers, the people that were settled here now from the EU, they would stay.
Absolutely,
they brought the skills.
Yes.
But you know there's a natural churn, and you know there are people that come for a short term and then go. You would put controls on that. But all the indicators from groups in London and business groups is that that will lead to serious problems in terms of the sector and construction if you do that. Or what arrangements would you put in place to allow more to come in, or would you say no more?
No, I think the point is here is that, you know, time and again we hear this. I go back to what I just said. We seriously need to train people who are here to do
So you would
jobs.
say no more, in other words?
No, I think that might not necessarily be the case. I mean, again, what we are saying as a party is we would have a point system.
Fine.
You know, for example, so if you need certain skills, then you need certain skills. That's the beauty of a point system. The problem is that the Prime Minister so far and the government have not really said anything about how they plan to control migration or otherwise.
Well, just to take out that point of a point system, because of course it was a point system that, you know, Labour introduced in terms of a sort of migration strategy, not in relation to the EU. But what would be wrong? Is that what you accept is what we would need now?
Well, I'm just genuinely confused watch all these Brexiteers jumping through hoops about how we don't really mean it about these EU workers. Of course we want them to stay, but when you actually ask for commitments, then they're not forthcoming. And people are voting with their feet now because of the real uncertainty. 1 in 6 people in my constituency comes from one of the 27 EU, and so every weekend when I knock on doors, that's the #1 issue, and people are really scared and worried, and understandably they're not making that commitment to this country. It's not just
what are they scared or worried about? Because if they've been here quite a long time, they'll be applying for residence.
That's not. I mean, come with me one weekend, and you'll see the real fear and concern and despair that people have, that they feel they're not wanted in this country anymore, and that can be professional people in the tech industry, it can be construction workers, it can be people in the hospitality industry.
As a Remain, and you voted to Remain, but Tanya, I mean, you're nodding during part of that. Do you agree the uncertainty needs to be resolved?
Absolutely. Like Andy, it is upsetting when you have EU nationals, and I had a surgery with one of our MEPs to reassure people, and they come from all sectors: construction, the care sector, science sector, creativity sector. These are all sectors where we want EU nationals to continue to come and work here as well. It's for our benefit. And the sadness is that the people that I've met do have a right to remain, but they're still concerned.
And on the ones that you want to
worried.
encourage to come in future, how would you do it? What is it? Some kind of, is it a work permit? Is it a points-based system you want to see? Is it a work permit? Is there an argument for a regional London work permit system?
I'm happy. I mean, I see it sector by sector. I'm happy for a system where we get people where there's ease of people coming in. Remember, we do have a problem for science of recruiting people from overseas. We want to make it as simple, non-bureaucratic. It's the practicality I'm more concerned about.
All right. Well, I'll come on to that, to both of you in a second on that. But Andy, now we are where we are, and you're someone that voted for Remain. What do you want to see in place now?
I do want to see more people trained in this country, but I've got a fantastic further education college, Amazon Fulham College, in my constituency, that trains people very well in construction skills. They're massively downsizing because their budgets have been cut. We are going to need migrant labour, EU labour, which is 1/4 of all the construction workers in London, and UK workers are only half, so the other 1/4 are from other countries around the world. We are going to need them for the foreseeable future, and I'm afraid that listen to parties like UKIP, who have created this climate of fear and got us into this situation, now crying crocodile tears about it.
It's not
a disgrace, quite frankly.
No,
and that somehow we're going to be able to find
the wrong argument with the wrong person. First of all, we have always said as a party, I couldn't
You're
be
a UKIP representative, aren't you?
Yes, I am indeed, and we have
Your
always...
party is responsible for creating this climate.
This country voted to leave the EU. You cannot come to terms with that. That is as simple as that. That is why you're so angry. Right? My party has always said that people from the EU who live and are settled here absolutely remain. We have never deviated from that, and if the government chooses to basically cause indecision and cause uncertainty for people, then basically that is their fault and you should be directing it at them, not at us.
Peter?
Secondly, the other point I would make is that...
Not my fault, Gary.
Very quickly, wrap up. We're running out of time.
Absolutely not. But I think that
the hypocrisy
it is not hypocrisy at all.
Make a second
you simply can't accept that. The fact is, as well, is that sooner or later we have got to seriously start training people here to do the jobs that at the moment we are bringing people in to do.
That point you've made. Peter Whittle, though,
Thank
thanks
you
very much indeed for coming in. Now for the rest of the political news in 60 seconds.
Delays in government backing for a new Thames crossing are damaging the UK economy, according to the Federation of Small Businesses. They claim delays threatened to bring the South East to a standstill, and the crossing was creaking under the pressure of 50 million vehicles each year. The trust behind plans to build the Garden Bridge across the River Thames in London has been cleared of any financial irregularities by the Charity Commission. The Commission found the trust had sound financial processes and the award of contracts was robust. Southwark Council has been fined for breaching fire safety regulations after a tower block blaze in 2009 killed 3 women and 3 children. A £400,000 fine was reduced to £270,000 because the council pleaded guilty at the earliest opportunity.
I think it was fair, taking into account, as the judge did, all of the mitigating factors that we've put forward, and I think particularly our close working relationship with London Fire Brigade since this incident.
Thoughts about a river crossing there. We've already talked about kind of funding or specific funding for schools in London. Is there any suggestion, or do you think Labour mayor now at City Hall, but a Conservative government, and the signals that London's is going to lose out over the coming years and they're going to want to rebalance to the rest of the country?
Interestingly,
possibly, that
well,
poll
no.
suggests.
Why I say that? Obviously, I didn't campaign for Steve Khan, but I give him absolute credit because as soon as he was elected, cross-party MPs wrote to him on we have joint concerns on Heathrow air pollution, and I think as London mayor, he's led very well on that, and I see him as a London mayor. I think he will fight the corner for London. We will fight the corner as London MPs, and I see people working together in that way.
So, Andy, not party political. It's the fact that, you know, everyone, whether you're Labour or Tory, will try and get the best for the capital. Maybe it has had too much.
Sadiq is doing an excellent job. He's got the best settlement on housing we've had for many years, but he doesn't control the big bucks. So I was astonished to hear Michael Gove saying he wished he hadn't cancelled the schools building programme. We do need affordable housing built in London. We need Crossrail too. It's essential that we have that investment.
2 different guests will be poring over the entrails of the budget next week, but you two, thanks very much indeed.
I've been getting